Guys, look what we made out of MDF, gave it a chiseled edge, added my favorite colors, and ended up with this gorgeous finish. Stay tuned, we'll show you how we did it. All right, so we'll be mixing 7 mica powders today for the finish. What I like to do when I'm mixing mica powders is, to make it a lot easier for me to stir, is I create a slurry. A lot of times when you put your mica powder in these plastic cups, the cup has a little reservoir down at the bottom, and it's really hard to kind of get a good mixture of your mica powders. So what I do is I create a slurry. This is 91% isopropyl alcohol. And I'm just gonna mix it up, and it'll be a little more than a paste, but I don't want it really runny. And what this does is it helps when I put the epoxy in there to get a really smooth mixture a lot quicker. Also, I don't get little chunks of mica powder like I do if I don't do the slurry first. So you can see it's not really runny, and it's not a super dry paste. If you get a little bit too much in there, it's okay. It's not gonna hurt anything. All right, so that was our copper, I believe. Yeah, that was our copper. Now what I did on this is I took some of the rust metallic, and all of these colors are available on my website, and I mixed it with bronze dust. So I gave this a little bit of a sparkle. So I didn't want a lot of sparkle in this finish, just a little bit. All right, so I'll continue to make a slurry with the rest of my colors, and then we'll get ready to mix it with the epoxy. Okay, so we have our mica powders mixed up, ready to go. It's time to mix our epoxy. I'm using Stone Coat Countertop Epoxy. This is a 1-to-1 ratio. And I'm doing a little over 3 ounces per square foot. And the reason I'm doing just a little bit over is I want to have enough color to kind of play with it on the table a little bit. If I see that I have one color a little bit too much, I can add another color and still have enough epoxy on the surface. All right, that was part B. We put part B first. It's a little thinner, makes it a little bit easier to mix. So we mix part B first before part A, because what happens is part B is a little thinner, a little less viscous, so it makes it easier to mix. Part A is quite a bit thicker. It'll fall down through part B a lot quicker, and we get a more accurate measurement. We'll mix for 2 minutes, and I'll make sure that I really get those sides so that I don't have any sticky spots when I pour my product on the table. All right, so after I mix with my drill, I'll come in with a mixing stick, and I'm gonna scrape the edges of the bucket several times, and then I'm gonna hand mix. Now the reason I do that is because the material that's on the side of the bucket is not gonna be mixed up as well as what's in the middle of the bucket. So a lot of times when you pour out your material on your surface, you're gonna get sticky spots. So this ensures that all the material in the bucket is mixed really well. Now, depending on what product you use, some products tell you with their instructions to change buckets, and that's fine. If the product that you're using, that's their mixing instructions, then by all means do that. Like I said, I use Stone Coat Countertop. With this method of mixing, I've never ever had any issues with sticky spots. And the way that I know that I'm mixing up my products correctly is after I'm done, I'll take my buckets, I'll turn them upside down, and I'll let them sit for a couple of days, and then they'll just pool right out. But if the sides of your bucket are always sticky, that should be a hint that you're not mixing your product thoroughly. I'm gonna do, on all my earth tone metallics, I'm gonna do all about the same amount. My 2 turquoise colors, I'm gonna do quite a bit less, because these are just accent colors. I actually will use a little bit less of the rust with the dust. I don't want too much bling in this countertop. Okay, so you can see by doing that slurry at the beginning how quickly and easily they mix. And I'm doing the colors very opaque. You can tell you can't see the grain of the stick. So this is our rust with the bronze dust in it. And you can see how that bronze dust just takes that rust and just makes it absolutely gorgeous. Okay, so on our dark bronze, I really wanted to deepen that metallic color, but I didn't want to lose my metallic finish. So what I'm doing is after I get it really stirred up well, I'm gonna come back and add just a few drops of the brown opaque dye, the Illuminate dye, and I'm not doing much. I'll do 1 drop at a time, and I'm just wanting to deepen it up just a little bit. Again, I'm not trying to lose that metallic finish, just want to get it a little darker. This will bring in some depth. Oh yeah, there we go. I've darkened it up quite a bit, but I still have a really pretty metallic. So these are the difference. These are my 2 darker colors. So you can see the difference. Really pretty. Okay, so you can see this spot here. All I did was turn my bucket upside down so that all that material would come out. Now all I'm gonna do is just take this out. And I really don't need a wash coat on this. I just don't want to waste any material. So I'm just gonna spread this out nice and thin. All right. So the way that we created this chisel look is take a carving disc, and I'll have a link in the descriptions on that particular carving disc. And we also have a video where we show you guys how to do this edge. But what I did here is it was painted black, and then I came back in and I painted it with copper metallic paint, let that dry, and then I just came back in with some turquoise paint. I believe this is deep mint. And then what I did is I came in with clay mica powder. And all I did is put that clay mica powder on my hand, and I touched it and I rubbed it in. So that gave me some highlights of all of the colors that are gonna be on the surface of this piece. Now, what I did to keep the mica powder from flaking off once I rubbed it is I sprayed it with matte, clear Rust-Oleum spray paint. Once I sprayed it, I let it dry, and that's where we are right now, ready to pour. So what we're gonna do is basically just start randomly pouring out our colors in no pattern. We wanna make sure this is very random. So we're gonna start off with coffee. And like I said, there is no real way to lay this out. I just don't want a hard pattern. I want it to be very random. Doesn't really matter which way you go, but I am gonna leave the rust that's mixed in with the bronze dust. I'm gonna leave it to the end so that I can kind of be a little more specific of where I want those colors. Now I'm just kind of filling in my areas. That was my copper. Now I'm gonna come in with the dark bronze, and this is the one where I put the opaque dye. And now I'm just starting to fill in my voids. Now you notice I'm not really getting close to my edges. I'm gonna do my edges a little bit different this time. I'm gonna be very light on my edges with the color coat because I don't want to cover any of the detail that I've already done. Then I'll come back and do a flood coat, and that's where I'll make sure that every bit of that edge is really covered. All right, now we're gonna come in with the clay. The clay is a very, very bold color. If you don't want quite so much of this bold color, you definitely can leave it out, substitute it for a more neutral type color. Clay is a beautiful color, but it can definitely take over a finish really quick. Now we're gonna bring in our bling. Now I'm pouring this in a little thinner streams. I'm not doing it quite so thick I just want this to be an accent. I really don't want big areas of that color. All right, this is the blue-green. Again, our turquoise is just an accent color. All right, tropical turquoise. Now they no longer have tropical turquoise with Stone Coat, so you could definitely substitute this color with their bright green or any other turquoise color that you would want to do. And all this does is it just gives it a level of depth because it's a different color turquoise. All right, so as you can see, everything is very random. I'm gonna let those colors come out of those cups. All right, so I'm gonna torch it just a little bit to help me with the next step and help it meld a little bit easier. All right, here we go. Here's the fun part. I like to use a Bondo spreader. You could also use a chop brush if you wanted to. I like the look that the Bondo spreader gives the surface. All right, so what you're gonna do, very lightly, you're gonna come in at an angle. You're not gonna come in straight up and down. You want to angle and you want to just barely hold on to that Bondo spreader. You don't want to grip it like this and move too much product. So very lightly, you're just gonna start moving that product over the surface, being really careful not to over mix. The key is to keep those colors separate and distinct while you're melding them. Now I'm gonna bring it over the edge a little bit, but I'm gonna deal with those edges in just a little bit. But right now we're just moving products. And if you could see, I'm not in any type of a pattern. It's very random. And this is another reason why I'll use a little bit more than 3 ounces per square foot. It gives me some material to be able to manipulate and meld. You don't want to do too much. I wouldn't go any higher than 4 ounces per square foot because you don't want your pattern to move and roll off your table. Again, I'm not addressing my edges yet. This is the raw edge. This will be against the wall, so I'm not worried about that edge. Now, you can kind of scan over your top, make sure your colors are all mixed or at least touched. If you have one big area that you want to bring in a little bit of detail in, you can do that. Now, don't fall in love with it at this point because we're gonna let this sit for a good hour and then we're gonna come back and do this again. So right now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some material and I'm just gonna start rubbing it over those edges a little bit. Now, I'm not worried about getting a lot of the color over this edge because what I'm gonna do is while my surface is setting for a good hour, I'm gonna go mix up a little bit of just clear epoxy and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna get my edges where they have a good coating of epoxy. Now the reason I'm not putting a lot of this colored metallic over this edge is because I love the way this edge came out and I don't want to cover it all with epoxy. Now you can see that I'm kind of messing up that design on the edge. That's okay because I'm going to come back with my Bondo spreader and I'm going to work those out. I'm just right now just getting a little bit of that color over my edge. Come back with my Bondo spreader, just tap it out a little bit. That way you don't see my hand marks. Again, I'm just barely putting any pressure at all. Now because the epoxy is self-leveling, we're still going to get some colors running down over that edge. Make sure that your surface has been leveled because the epoxy is gonna self-level. And if your surface isn't level, all of your color and all of your design is gonna run and you'll come back the next morning and your beautiful design is all gonna be at one end or it's gonna be on the floor. Okay, so I'm gonna torch now to get rid of the bubbles. So I'm not gonna add a lot of heat to this surface because what's happening right now is those mica powders are starting now to sink down into the epoxy because the epoxy is very fresh. So What's gonna happen is we're gonna wait about an hour, and then we're gonna rejuvenate, I guess you would call it, the mica powders, and cause them to kind of wake up a little bit, and then we're gonna go to the next step. So I mixed up my clear epoxy, just plain clear, no additives, and now I'm gonna just address my edges. You can do this with a paintbrush. I just like to use my hands, and I'm gonna come underneath and really help that epoxy roll underneath that edge. All right, it's been about an hour and 10 minutes. 74 degrees in here. Humidity's not too bad. And we've let this set up. And the reason we're doing that is because the mica powders have fallen now to the bottom, all right? So if you look, you can tell that now our pattern is very, very smooth. It's very soft. All of the mica powders have settled, creating a really soft pattern. Now, if you like this pattern, you definitely don't have to go to the next step. This is really, really pretty, but I'm not walk away, Rhonda, so we're not gonna walk away. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna agitate those micas, and we're gonna bring them back up to the surface, and then we're gonna hit them with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. But this is the stage that you want your epoxy to be in, and you can check underneath. And what you wanna do is you want it to have a consistency where you're getting a strain, all right? So it's starting to thicken up, and that's what we're looking for. Another thing I want you guys to notice is I did not pull a lot of that color that was on the surface over on my edge, because I really want these colors, the really distinct colors, to show. That's why I went back just with clear epoxy, so that I really have that pretty chiseled edge. I'm gonna go back with my Bondo Spreader, and I'm gonna do the exact same thing that I did before. It's just gonna it's gonna create a pattern, and that pattern's gonna stay a little better because the epoxy's starting to set up. You can see as we agitate and move, you can really create some really cool patterns. Now you can also do this, instead of using a Bondo Spreader, you can use a plastic bag, you could use a chop brush and just chop. But what you want to do is be really careful that you don't, again, over meld your colors. The fact that all these colors are very distinct is giving us a really cool look. You don't want to use heat at this point. If I were to heat this surface up too much, I'm gonna cause that epoxy to go backwards as far as what stage it's in. It would go back to be very fluid. Therefore, all those micas that I'm agitating right now would fall back down. Now you may decide to do some parts with the Bondo Spreader and leave some of the areas untouched. That would really give a unique look as well. You can see when we hit, or when we take that Bondo Spreader over the surface, how it wakes those mica powders up and those colors just bounce back. You can see here's a really good way to see this is the softness of the pattern, and this is what it looks like after you hit it. So it's still gonna move a little because the epoxy is still very fluid. So you're still gonna get some movement. You're not gonna have really hard, distinct lines like it is right now. All right, that's really pretty. Okay, so now we're gonna come with the secret sauce. If you have any bubbles, you can pop them with your finger. If you have a lot of bubbles, if you've really churned up a lot of bubbles, you can very, very quickly skim it with your torch if you need to. But as little heat as you can use, the better. All right, so now we're gonna come in with the same mica powders that we used on the surface. This is clay, this is copper, sorry. It's 1/2 of a bag, which is 1/4 of an ounce, mixed with 8 ounces of isopropyl alcohol, 91% or higher. All right, so what I wanna do, I don't wanna do a fine mist. I want to create large drips, because what that's gonna do is those large drips are gonna hit that surface, and it's gonna kind of make the epoxy kind of almost give it an illusion of it spreading out. So I'm gonna shake it up, I'm gonna put it in my hand, and then I'm just gonna drip And by dripping it out of my hand, I have a lot of control of where I want it to go. So we don't want to put too much alcohol on the surface. What'll happen, it'll make our epoxy runny and we'll lose our pattern. Now you can do this with any of the colors. You can even do it with plain alcohol if you don't want to add any metallic on top. Now the alcohol is going to dissipate and it's just going to leave that mica powder and it's going to have a really cool design. All right, so that was copper. I'm going to let that sit for just a second. Okay, now I'm going to come in with clay. And clay is like jalapeno peppers. A little bit goes a long way. But now what I'm going to do, instead of just dropping little drips, I'm going to kind of cause them some designs. So I've got it to where my nozzle is spraying a straight stream, and I'm going to just start hitting some lines in it. The lines are not going to be super distinct because they're going to move, but as you step back, you'll be able to kind of see them from an angle. Just be really careful that you don't do a lot of just X's. So it looks like little circles right now, but as it starts to move, the alcohol starts to evaporate and the epoxy continues to kind of move, you're gonna get some really, really cool designs. I think I'm gonna come back with one more color. I'm gonna come back in with the blue-green. Not a lot of blue-green, just ever so often. You really can't see this unless the light hits it just right. You really can't tell it's blue-green. I would say we are done. So we're gonna just let this piece do its thing, let the alcohol work with the epoxy, cause some really, really cool designs. Tomorrow, I'll put a logo on this and flood coat it with just clear epoxy. And then we will put the ultimate top coat in high gloss. We do have a video on how to do the ultimate top coat, and we will link it in the description below. Okay guys, I hope you liked this video. Oh my gosh, this is one of my very, very favorite. Great colors, love them. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We love hearing from you guys. All right, so all of these products are available on our website, RK3designs.com. Also, we'll have additional pictures and links to follow to purchase the products. We also have an online course, onlineepoxypro.com. You can learn all of these finishes in a menu-based format. All right, guys, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel. We would love to increase our subscribers. And also ring the bell. That way you know when we post another video. Until next time, guys, remember, don't be scared, move forward, and be creative.